You can draw people in lots of different places. You can draw each of the platforms are used in different ways.
Hello, friends. As you can see, I'm working on my wiki bag.
What is known internationally as the kind of trad wife set of viewpoints, which is white, Christian, a lot of pseudo-Celtic, pseudo-Nordic ideologies behind it. Each of the platforms, they use Pinterest and Instagram to draw in other women who are interested in interior design, children's clothing, knitting, healthy food for children. And it does draw people in towards a set of white nationalist ideas. I mean, it's relatively easy to see. If you see a very beautiful, fair-skinned, blonde or red-haired child with beautiful braiding in her hair and some flowers, just step back a little bit. Which is really distressing because that's my heritage.
Well, there you go. Yeah, if you're a white woman raising children, you're a white nationalist. Truth revealed. Hello, everyone. I'm Hector, and I am here with Gilbert for this episode of Endeavour News.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
We are also joined with very special guest Dieuwe de Boer.
Hey, hello everyone, and thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, happy to have you here, my good man. Well, as the best person to introduce yourself is probably you. So why don't you give everyone a quick rundown of who you are, what you do, what you're involved in, and what brought you here today?
Well, my name is Dieuwe de Boer, and that's a Dutch name. Well, Frisian, got a little bit of a Frisian background, and it's my grandfather who was born in Frisia. He actually spoke the language there. They have a slightly different language to Dutch, and so I kind of got a name from there. And it's actually supposed to be the same language as Old English, but the names apparently didn't transfer across the hundreds and hundreds of years that the languages diverged. And I lived here in New Zealand since my parents immigrated in 2002. And then I started writing political commentary in late 2016, which was first election of Donald Trump in the United States. And I started a blog, rightminds.nz, and wrote there for many, many years. And then got involved in politics a little bit as well with the New Conservatives. And then more recently, especially this year, since February, I've been hosting a show on Reality Check Radio, The Dialogue. And it used to be a Friday show, but they've recently shuffled it back to Monday. And I actually had a lady say that she's happy my show's on Monday now because the Friday lineup was so good she couldn't leave her house on Friday because she was listening to it. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear the fans of the show, and that goes Monday lunchtime, basically midday to 2 p.m. on Mondays, and talk about politics, power, and culture. That's the tagline. And I do a lot of interviews with the patriotic movements from overseas, mostly focused on Europe at the moment. New Zealand history and classical music, and I try and interview New Zealanders as well, historians and other commentators. That's also how I got involved with William McGimpsey, and he'd been doing Twitter commentary for a long time, but he was the first guest on my show, and he does a regular segment now. So every week I'll talk with William as well. I think he's been on your show in the past. And I also write for Cameron Slater's blog, which has gone through a few iterations, but the current one is goodoil.news. So I have a column there every Saturday morning. And then there's also another commentator that I work with, Brendan Malone, who does sort of podcasts most weekdays. And I do one a month with him talking about politics. Yeah, that's probably the gist of what I do in terms of politics. I live in South Auckland. I'm married. I've got 3 kids, and I'm a Christian and very, normal right wing. Trying to live like a normal life. That's my ideology is it's like normal people living normal lives. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. That's really awesome. That's and how did you? I'm just wondering. So, where did you get started? Was it with NewCon, or where was the beginning to it?
So it was rightminds.nz, which I founded. It's like a blogging platform, a think tank for my ideas and some other people. We've had a few different contributors over the years. At the moment, it's mostly just me, and there's a few. Every now and then, there's an article from someone else. But in the early days, we had libertarians, like old school Tories, and nationalists and conservatives, and sort of blogging basically, and that worked quite well. And it was really because of Donald Trump's election um, that we all got, like, people met together, like, oh, who's the Donald Trump supporter in New Zealand? You know, who's the Donald Trump supporter
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Auckland? And that was in late 2016, and that's how these sort of things kicked off.
Yeah, it's amazing the inspiration he had like all over the world. I think that was sort of like the battle cry almost, or the trumpet call or whatever. That is kind of interesting how a lot of things seem to accelerate after that. So, oh, that's really awesome how you were the first to hear the call, and you're involved in a lot of different stuff. So that's great. I guess the main thing would be to get you on RCR. Would that be correct? Is that sort of the main avenue
Yeah, at
of
the
your?
moment, because that's a
Yeah.
weekly thing that I do. I'm very heavily involved with RCR. I would say they're the biggest, in my opinion, in terms of creating content and pushing boundaries,
Oh
and
yeah, of course.
just covering like everything from just normal things to also completely crazy things, which is part of the fun, I think. But lots of different hosts. It's not like a right wing outlet. It's more of a you could almost call it a dissident outlet, in that it formed out of the freedom movement, and was Voices for Freedom. Was sort of the original volunteer group during the COVID lockdown. So it came from all of these different people who were opposed to COVID lockdowns, and that was sort of the common theme. And it turned into, as you can imagine, and this is something that the government has run into trouble with, and the left wing as well. It turned into, well, if the government's lying to us about this, what else is the government lying to us about? And that opens up a lot of avenue.
Yeah, it turns out
Mm,
quite a lot.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as it turns out, they are lying about a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on that now? We've just gone through what two years. It was 2 and a bit years of lockdown. Now it's a bit over 3 years. If my memory's so hazy, um, of kind of undergoing this very strange circumstance, and it seems like the best we got is this investigation that's happening that I believe Winston Peters is the head of, that is now being I believe they each have a part in it. Is that correct? With National and ACT, they're sort of heading this inquiry into how the NZ government behaved. What are your thoughts on? I guess we should just start with that. What are your thoughts on general of where we are now, with everything that happened?
Well, your memory being a little bit hazy is a very normal thing that a lot of people experienced during the last
Yeah.
going back five years, and the conception of time passing was disrupted for many people. So
Yeah.
um, everyone struggles with that a little bit. How many years ago was that? And yeah, we had a baby just before, so she
Hmm.
was born in a couple of months before all of that stuff went off. And so we had a tried to sort of focus on our family, and it all went quite stable and well for us at that time. But I think a lot of people struggled, and things went bad for a lot of people. And yeah, the COVID inquiry that has been announced, and I'm not exactly sure who is heading it up, who's in charge, who they've picked. And maybe they haven't picked people for it yet. But the really key thing was that RCR was heavily involved in pushing for the people's terms, they called it, to actually do an investigation that wasn't just going to be a whitewash. It might still be. I mean, I don't know. It's hard. You should always be careful when you're having an inquiry as a government. Like you want to control the outcome, right? You want to predetermine the outcome. And in a sense, with referendums, they try and do the same. It's very dangerous for a government to hold referendums if they don't control the outcome.
Yeah, just
And
look
when
at
they
what happened in
don't,
Australia with the Aboriginal one, the Aboriginal
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
voice
yeah, and I
one.
mean Brexit. You think Brexit?
Yeah, of
New Zealand
course.
had a flag one as well. John Key lost a lot of political capital on his flag referendum many years ago now. So it's always fun when that happens. There was actually a Christian party in New Zealand, and this was well before my time. But they went into government with Helen Clark, and they got her to do like a family inquiry or something. And but Helen, and that was that was like their coalition deal to get and to sort of study what was going wrong with family breakdown and to try and fix up families. So they thought, oh, that's great. Well, we'll get like a family policy. And Helen Clark just stacked it with like radical leftists, and they just turned it into like total degeneracy. So I think I'm assuming that New Zealand First has some good, slick political operators on this. Winston Peters is supposed to know what he's doing. So I think that there's some good opportunities here to have uh, break open some of the taboos and some of the things that they've shut down, and
Mm,
broaden the terms to actually look at vaccine harm and the harm that lockdowns actually did to people, rather than just the government patting itself on the back. So hopefully they'll actually come back with some negative things to say, yeah, these things went wrong and these things were bad. Even that, I think, would be a win in and of itself, to actually have the government say, yeah, we made some mistakes, and the official inquiry said we made some mistakes. um, and it shows as well that what a group like RCI can do when it when people work together and we put our minds to a particular issue and we focus on it, um, we can actually get something out of it. So it's a question of, well, how do we leverage that onto other issues? How do we focus on the next thing and get lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, putting aside some of their other political differences, to work on something in the interests of all of us together. And so that's to me the big lesson to take away from this, whatever happens with the inquiry.
Yeah, it does seem like NZ First is sort of the one party that is actually really pushing for this, and they're kind of, I mean, trust no one in politics, right? I mean, it's pretty. Hector and I were actually quite dismayed at the election results because it, after all those years of like severe lockdowns and punishments and just really harassing everyday New Zealanders, it seemed like when the election results rolled round, it's almost like you know people hadn't really learned much, if at all. I think it was like what NZ
Yeah.
First got around. Yeah, did you want to jump in, Hector?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did the election day stream, and I mean, National Party got like 30 something percent of the vote, and Labor got 26, and then Greens got 13. So you still have what, 70% of the people that voted for these pro-lockdown, pro-mandate parties and whatnot. So it was pretty silly. At least like Labor was gone. It's like, oh, well, Labor's gone. That's good. But it's like, come on, this is National Party, like we were talking about
It just
before.
went to national.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just went to national again. It's just going to be more of the same old. So it's good that at least New Zealand First did get in. I think if they didn't get in, it would pretty much be exactly like verbatim. It would be nearly the exact same as what Labor did. Like there would have been no inquiries. There would have been no sort of accountability in the government. It would have been the same as under John Key. But yeah, it is sort of disappointing that people are still voting for the two big parties, the two centre right and supposed centre left parties. It, I just can't believe that, yeah, 70% of the people still have faith in these two monolithic parties and still aren't voting for New Zealand First, at least, or other
Mm,
parties like Loyal or NZ Democracy and all that.
mm, mm.
Yeah, it's something that I've learned being involved in politics in minor party or minnow party politics, as people sometimes call it,
Yeah.
sort of protest votes, basically, with the Conservatives, and saying like, oh yeah, people aren't actually interested. Like, you can have the best policy in the world, in the country, and people don't actually care. So you need to kind of grapple with the fact that democracy sucks. And
Well,
and that
Jesus.
and I'm saying this as someone who's in politics, but yes, people just vote for the big parties anyway, and they vote for National and ACT. People like to vote for winners. So when you get to the edges on the right, say people will pick ACT or New Zealand First because they're like, well, at least at least I'm a winner if I vote for them. So I won't knock entryism so much anymore. I think that some other people I've seen in other parts of the world have been promoting entryism a lot more and saying it doesn't really matter which party, but I would add a little wrapper around that to say don't do it by yourself. I think a lot of people just go into politics and are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go and change this party, and the machine will just swallow you up, and the beast will eat you. The only some people can do that. Like I can give an example of like Simeon Brown, who's like the transport minister now. He I remember like years ago with his brother, and we'd be like, yeah, Simeon, he's selling out, and he's going into this politics, and he won't talk about any issues. But like Simeon Brown has just gone and like bulldozed leftists. He's like building roads over the top of screaming leftists, basically. Because that's his dream, and he's just pushing it, and he's relentless, right? He just pushed into politics, got a portfolio. You think like transport portfolio, what's that? And he's like, transport portfolio, okay, cool. I get like bulldozers and just start like building roads. So you get someone like that, they're good. They can do that. I used to knock them, that kind of behavior, but I don't anymore. But I think for most people, it's like work together with people who have same interests as you, form little factions, and go into these parties and make a difference. Because you can pull their policy. These parties need volunteers, and even outside, if you can't stomach these parties that are in Parliament in coalition, outside of Parliament, we also have
like we have local governments and stuff.
And there's of course local government as well, which is a different story. But see, Simeon Brown started in local government. He started as like a board of Manurewa. It was Manurewa Action Team was the name of the group, which wasn't not officially aligned with the National Party. I don't even know if they were right wing, but he just like got on there, and whatever he's doing now with the Ministry of Transport, he just goes on and does it. Right? He was the first minister to write a memo to his department saying, get rid of the Waka Kotahi, get rid of the Maori name.
Yes, that was pretty epic.
And he just like did that on the first day. He just got in. He's like, get rid of it, send it in. Okay, the next day.
No one knows what a waka mamako or whatever it is. It's like no one knows what it is. So just change these names back to names that people can understand.
It reminds me of Futurama when somehow Genghis Khan gets on the spaceship and he goes, "No, me no like space."
Once we get this working.
It's like, I don't know if you guys remember that, but it kind of sorry. I kind of just interjected.
No, that's fine. I feel like Waka Kotahi. If you translate it, it's like one boat. Like we're all in the same boat. What does that have to do with building roads? But of course, the point is it didn't, right? Like the leftists renamed it because they didn't want to build roads, and so like I don't know if it's like right. It's not. I don't want to say it's right wing to build roads because I'm a bit of a traditionalist in terms of urbanism, and like I think we should have some.
Of course. But
like it's good it's healthier for families to have walkable cities and to be able to use your bikes and all of that. I'm a cyclist myself.
I live in a small
when he's
town.
like cancel the cycle lanes, but I'm like I don't care because we're winning. I'll give up. I'll give that up. It's give and take. But in his case, it's just like building roads is anti-leftism, and that's good enough. Like just bulldoze them.
Yeah, well, I mean, cars do make like commies safe, like because then you can actually, I don't know, choose your employers and stuff more easy without being refined to the public transport system or walking. And it brings you, it's independence. If you shouldn't need a car to go down and have a glass of water or something, like to go get some water or to go buy some food. You can. I think it is.
Yeah,
good
yeah.
to
You
have
want to
that
buy a
stuff
loaf
walkable.
of bread. Like you don't want to buy a loaf of bread. What do you need to get in a car for?
Yeah.
Obviously, like we have dairies and so on around New Zealand, but one of the problems you have as well, and I saw this from Stone Toss. Actually, I retweeted it very recently, just this morning, and it sums up my opinion on public transport because I used to take trains for a long time, but Stone Toss tweet, insists public transport is good, and then creates the lowest trust society possible, so it is a nightmare to use.
And
that's like
that
leftism.
as well. Yeah,
That's what leftism is. Like, oh yes, we're going to put you all on the public transport, and then we're going to create this culturally enriched, diverse society where you'll get beaten up if you try and get on a bus or a train or whatever. And it's just
it's beating us into the wood chipper.
It's just like litter everywhere and people screaming and druggies everywhere, and it's not nice to use, right? And then they'll talk like, oh yes, Japan has a wonderful public transport system. It's like,
there's something else Japan doesn't have.
They only have Japanese people.
Yeah.
And Singapore is wonderful. It's like, yeah, okay, it's like a super authoritarian city with it's again like 70-80% Chinese in their case. Like they don't have the leftist enrichment policies, and that's why their public transport systems are nice. Eastern Europe apparently very nice public transport system, but what does Eastern Europe have? They only have Eastern Europeans. Like that's they kind of so yeah. Anyway, so I understand Simeon Brown and the transportation policies, like because New Zealand is being turned into such a terrible country, like the roads are the only thing that are sort of safe to use. And even then, like, okay, the roads are not safe to use because they keep importing people who don't know how to drive, and then like the accident rate goes up. And just last Saturday, actually, my wife and I mentioned it. We used the motorway 4 times to go somewhere, come back, go somewhere else, come back, in traffic because of accidents 4 times out of out
Wow.
of the 4 uses of the motorway. Just completely insane.
Oh my god.
Yeah, well,
that's horrifying.
that's the thing. I mean, people from like these crap countries, like Philippines or whatever, they could just buy their license and then they come here and they're allowed to use that license to drive on our roads. Like, what the heck? Like, it's ridiculous.
Really?
Yeah, they
Wow,
don't even
man.
do any tests in a lot of these countries. Let's go, oh, here's $5. Now you have a driver's license, full driver's license.
Especially in Southeast Asia, like you look how they drive, and like it's like wow, you wouldn't even have to get a license over there. You just like hop on and just go 100 miles per hour through some
Yeah.
little like dingy village or whatever. It's like, jeez, so that's freaky. I mean, yeah, it's another case of clearly one of these things is not like the other, uh,
Yeah.
and we're bringing that over here.
You mentioned on this earlier, but you mentioned local politics. I don't know what it is. I think I had the discussion, I think it was off air with Gil. It's like you have these parties pop up, like New Conservative, Loyal, whatever, the one that Brian Tamaki made. And they run for the national parliament, and then they lose the election, and then they give up and fade away and disappear. Like, why do none of these parties stick around for the local elections, which are actually quite important? And they'd actually probably get a few representatives because like no one runs for local elections. So they could probably get people in, and then they could start building a power base. I just don't understand why this never seems to happen. Like
Very odd.
like Loyal, for example, the Loyalty run by Liz Gunn, right? They deregistered as a party a couple
Yeah,
months
they're
ago.
gone.
Yeah, it's like you couldn't wait another year for the local elections and maybe gain a couple elected representatives. Like, it
Suspicious.
doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
Very
why
weird.
none of these parties do it? What do you, you've been you've been more involved with the party
I mean, involved. Yeah, I've never
politics.
actually
So what's
run.
your thoughts? What's your thoughts on that?
Interesting thing because I've never actually run for local. Every time it comes around, I think about doing it and I don't actually do it. But party, I don't know why. I don't really have a good answer for you other than the Conservative Party did have local board members.
Oh well, there you go.
It only ever had. It's only like it's at the beginning. It had local board members in one just up in northwest Auckland somewhere. I forget exactly where. But that was in like 2011 now. So
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If the Loyalty Party stuck around and ran representatives in local towns around the country, they would have got probably dozens of people into these positions.
We'll need to see how that works coming this election as well, because I think there's a lot more thought going into it.
It's about time people started using their brains, because I've thought this for years. Yeah. Like, why does like Social Credit Party? I mean, they're gone now as well. Loyalty, New Conservative. It sounds like they did in the past. Whatever the Vision, Brian Tamaki's one. They never the local elections. They just never do it, and hopefully now people start wising up to that.
Yeah, I think it's part of it is, especially if you're say a small party. Thinking about it, you have very few resources, very few people, and so then the national election becomes an easier target because you need fewer people and people who are like spread around the country. So you've got like some guys in Auckland, some guys in Wellington, some guys in Christchurch, where you can work on like a national election. But then it's a much more difficult at a local level. But yeah, I think the Labour Party does it. The Labour Party are actually the only ones to do it, and the Greens do it.
Yeah,
as well.
Labour and Greens, and then everyone's surprised that our like councils are like dominated by communists because the Labour and Greens are the only ones running in it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I think you'll see a little bit more from perhaps
New Zealand First
like
Act,
mostly done as an independent kind of like coalitions of independents, sort of, or independents with similar ideas and go forward. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm very interested as well. See what we'll do this election. Like obviously Auckland, for the first time ever, we got like a right wing sort of mayor in terms of Wayne Brown being, I guess, liberal, neoliberal, whatever term people want to use. On the right wing option is like whatever it is, the non-communist option, and he's doing all right. And the council seems to be doing okay. Like for the first time ever from the last local elections, Auckland had a little bit of a shift in that direction. But yeah, we don't really have any right-wing ticket that runs across the entire city. People seem to think that it's just local people voting for local things, so they just want someone they recognize, and that's the biggest thing in local politics. Like if people recognize your name, you win. That's how like local politics works. Very different to national level. So
yeah, but also it's very low turnout as well. Like I think parties could help get people more excited and more involved in local elections. It's just sort of bizarre that this doesn't happen. And then Labours and Greens, They just run and win all the council seats in all these cities because no one else is running against them. It's just bizarre.
That's why it's so important what Duo is doing with RCR, because we really need that mass appeal kind of thing. And
Yeah, and I think RC, like media, like getting media attention can be hard as well. I talked with a
Yeah.
few people who ran locally, and they said like just getting the like local newspaper to print a story about you was
Well,
almost
no one reads the
impossible.
local newspaper except like 75-year-olds nowadays. So.
Yeah, so those are gone. But that's why something like RCR can be great. Come the local election, we can help to kind of shine the spotlight on certain local tickets and push people in
Oh
those
yeah,
areas to
absolutely.
get out and support them. So that's, I think, will be a big part of what RCR will do during that election. I can't. I mean, I'm not in charge of the strategy. Don't quote me on this. But if I were, if I had some people running locally, I would interview them on my show, for instance, because that would be good. People are interested in that kind of content at that time when it's a local election. I had like the only councillor I've had on my show has been an Australian one. He got re-elected in Australia recently. I don't know if you saw the Australian New South Wales local elections, and the Libertarians there.
Oh yes, I did see that.
Yes. But he was an independent, but he won re-election. He was opposed to like homosexuality and the transgender stuff in libraries.
Why is he running for like the Liberal Party if he's against mass immigration? Isn't that like part of their ideology?
He's not part of the. He's an independent. Steve
he's
Christie.
an independent. Oh, okay.
But the Libertarians.
Oh, Libertarians. Sorry, I misheard
They have
you.
right-wing Libertarians who got 16 of them who got elected, and they ran on like
anti-immigration,
and anti-lockdown stuff as well.
If they can do it in New South Wales, you can do it here. Like you can get people
I
running
think so
on.
Too.
Yeah, running on. Oh, sorry, you go. I'll let you speak.
No, I'm gonna let you go. I agree. I think that can be done. Just a question of the fact that I've never even heard people discuss it. So the fact that we're discussing it is the first step to.
Oh yeah, I've thought about this for years. Like I've always thought, like, why does New Zealand First not run people in local elections? Why doesn't the Social Credit Party, when they're actually still around, run people in local elections? Why doesn't Loyal, New Conservative, whatever, run people in local elections? And because all you see is like independent, like Commie, Green, and Labor. That's it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the independents are also still just like leftists as well, so you have to like look into it.
I have thought about in my local area, because the Labor Party always wins because you put Labor on the ticket and they win here. I remember talking to Sir Roger Douglas about this because he ran as the Labor Party. He always said, "Oh, when I was a candidate, you could just like stick your name on the ballot and like sit at home and you'd win." And so I thought it was a joke of running like a not Labor ticket, so like create a little local ticket in the area and just call it not Labor and like see if
that'd be sort of funny.
They probably can't do it. They'd probably protest like, no, you can't put not Labor on the ballot. Anyway, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's very simple to, very easy to put up a little ticket locally. There's a guy down like across. I actually don't know where he lives, but he started this ticket called Otara First. The Otara local board. That's the only one locally that I've seen someone do something funny. Like that. I don't know if he'll be back this time, but he didn't win because it's like, Labor.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are other parts of the country, not where I live, that are
South Island electorates like Ashburton, that sort of area.
Yeah, especially rural New Zealand, out west, east, like East Auckland is because again, it's like East Auckland is like 50-60% Chinese now, so you could run like Labor can't win there, so you'd have a good shot there if you went East Auckland and things like that.
Oh, I mean, not if you had like an anti-immigration sort of like. I was thinking about it because I think helping people in the local elections should be one of our main goals in the coming year. If you're not running, then helping out good people, like great people that are trying to get elected to these positions. And I thought about this. Like, what would be good policies for local elections? I think obviously good ones are non-compliance with any future mandates, like not like vaccine mandates or mask mandates. Councils not complying with such central level government, national level government mandates. Against like refugee resettlements in your town, because that's something they do over time. It's a really bad thing that's happening in places like Nelson, for example. They're just settling refugees from like Cambodia and Somalia there, and Invercargill in the South Island population centers specifically. So anti refugee resettlement was a big one. And just again, against co-governance and anti-white agenda, white genocide against white genocide, I think are good ones to run on. And it'll be good to see how far that could get on a local level, and if that message resonates with certain electorates.
I think the biggest problem that you have locally is that you have very little power And like central, if you disrespect the central government, the local government minister can just like fire your entire local council and replace them with commissioners. So that's
But
one of the
again,
problems in New Zealand. But it doesn't like if you can make
if
them
that
do that,
happens,
that's a
that's
good
sort of,
thing
if you
too.
make them intervene in such a way, that's a massive victory. Like it's showing that they're afraid of any sort of dissidence in the ranks. So if you could get people like that elected, force the minister to fire you, even though you just won an election, it would be pretty massive. It would be a pretty big win, really.
Yeah, that certainly will work. Yeah, so like making a difference can be hard, but just winning and sitting, and just taking up a seat so that some, communist. I was going to use a different word. But
A
this
globalist.
this is this is yeah, you should be a localist. I was like, oh, this is YouTube. I got to be careful. Don't get
I
flagged.
think you're allowed to say communists on YouTube.
And
I mean,
you
we do
can,
all the time, so I think we'll be right.
and okay, good. And then you can, then at least you're taking up the seat. That's already a massive improvement.
Yeah, I think the next year will be something to look for, and me and Gil and yourself, I think we should on our shows help epic people get elected to these positions and raise awareness and help with people's
Oh yeah,
campaigns. Because
absolutely. Yeah, we need to do that immediately. I mean, Labor and Greens, they're just like funneling people in like hotcakes or cookies or something. And it's just like, man, we've basically got to do the same
And
and just even tell them that, like, have Diwa as like the mastermind of it all and just tell them what to do or something. We need to act fast though because,
I don't need to be the
national.
mastermind. I can just be the front face, the front man.
Yeah, well, that or you could be both.
But yes, and I was thinking there's some councils have actually adopted like STV and other kind of pooled candidates and things. So if you just get someone in and give him enough votes, like it only needs to be a few thousand, and he like pops up above everybody else's name, and,
Yeah.
and they pick them out. So it's not like a first past the post election where you need to get a huge amount of votes. You just need to convince. In many local elections, it is just like if you can convince 1,000 people, 2,000 people, or whatever.
Well, some of these elections are
It's
uncontested. I think the mayor of Lower Hutt was literally ran uncontested. So all you needed was like some like Spurg to run against him and like I don't know, dudes like just start talking about things, like be like a based guy running against him. Obviously he's not going to win, but at least you'll be getting your message out there, and it'll be sort of funny to be the one guy running against an incumbent mayor. Maybe not Spurg. That's probably a bit harsh
At least it would be
language.
sort of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you the Diwa, you go.
I mean, like
you guys
someone on our wavelength, someone based running.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I'll just shut up.
Yeah. I was in Auckland, like you were talking about the demographic replacement as well happening, and in Auckland, this is a big issue that's kind of weirdly gone in a again quote unquote right wing direction, because for the first election ever, the last election was like Auckland was like less than 50% white, basically less than 50% European New Zealander, and we didn't get a left wing mayor, probably in a large part because the way the election used to work is say you've got 60% of European New Zealanders who are right wing and 40% who are left wing. They'd go out and vote, and then you get the Maori and Pacifica, like the Polynesian voters, and they'd be like 90% left wing. And so then left wing victory every single time. But then they brought in like 100,000 Chinese immigrants. And I saw polling from the last election, 90% of Chinese immigrants vote National and ACT. So you get Wayne Brown, who's like the National ACT guy, and then you get the like 90% of those 100,000 Chinese immigrants who go, okay, cool, they vote for Wayne Brown. And so suddenly the demographic scales have tipped, and this like right sort of quote unquote right wing guy can win the election in Auckland because of the demographic replacement that they've done. And like they've cancelled out the Polynesian voting bloc because they'd be like 90% left wing, and they've just like imported a new ethnic voting bloc that's 90% right wing. This is not good, by the way. I'm not saying this is like, oh yes, great, we're going to win, but it does mean that in the future, like elections in Auckland already are basically just ethnic head counts, and that's something that people should be aware of as well. That is going to spread to the rest of New Zealand, because these people, we have polling data that just shows these people vote, these ethnic groups vote as blocks, and at some point either you will see an alignment of like European New Zealanders voting as an ethnic bloc as well, or they just like cobble together a coalition of different ethnic blocs, and then you have to trade for whatever bargaining they want. But you don't have like an election on issues anymore. It just becomes like ethnic head counts. the elections just get
Interesting.
replaced with do enough people of this particular ethnic group show up.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
his.
Yeah, I personally I think so you've got the Chinaman and others voting for Nets Act, and then you got the Pollies voting for Labour Greens, and it's just like, okay, this is kind of who they're going for. We need to be represented too, right? So I mean, to me, like we identified that we all didn't like how Gunn and Tamaki and others just sort of, wisped themselves away into they just evaporated. To me, it becomes quite obvious that the people who you can trust, who are, you know, somewhat steady and straight shooters, is NZ First. I mean, they've been in the game for over 20 years. Peters has been kept, a pretty consistent line of reasoning as to where New Zealand should, or what New Zealand should do, or where it should go in general. To me, they kind of stand out like a sore thumb in terms of they don't toe the party line, which really, I personally, I see really no fundamental or significant difference between Labour Greens or National Act. I mean, that they're all generally directionally going in sort of the same stream, or taking New Zealand down the same route. So, yeah, I mean, it's like somehow I think we in terms of the European New Zealand vote, we have to focus them towards Peters, and that's my controversial take today. What do you guys think, or what do you think, Diwa? You go first.
I'm sort of coming around to that a little bit in terms of actually pleasantly surprised with how well he has delivered for his voters in this case, and that seems to be a positive. And of course, you can see if they had more voters, they have more influence, right? And so that's how the elections work. I do think there's room for protest votes and conscience votes
Of
and
course.
minor like parties outside of power to even to come up with policy ideas and running on those policies ideas and normalizing them. And that's something we've sort of done a bit in the New Conservatives anyway. And then sometimes you'll see, oh, hey, these other parties are picking up on the policy that we've been proposing. Like, oh yeah, that's nice, yoink. And of course, they have much more money and much more influence, and they run with it to their favor. So, and of course, if New Zealand First had like, if you look at their party list, if they had a bunch more MPs, they'd have a bunch more like anti-vax, like anti-lockdown
Mm,
people if they'd gone further along that way. So they definitely are committed to delivering for uh, the demographics that elected them,
sure.
and which tends to you can see it like they go for like old people. They know that the boomers are voting for them, so they give stuff to the boomers, and like they know the anti-lockdown people are voting for them, so they're giving stuff to the anti-lockdown
Mm,
people.
Yeah.
And so if you can bring in another book and you say, hey, we're young guys who care about immigration and so on, then as long as there's enough of you and as long as you have some influence in the party, then absolutely they will be forced to deliver some policy for you. They seem to do that quite consistently. Of course, they will put their bigger interests first. So you need to keep that in mind as well. So put New Zealand first, but obviously part of that means if you don't deliver for your voters, nobody's voting for you. So they
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
mm.
Well, I mean, they were sort of punished for that in 2020 after they went with Labour for 3 years and sort of propped up Jacinda, and then their vote percentage crashed from 7% to 2%. Then it bounced back up on the wave of people that are pissed off with the current system, pissed off with Labour, pissed off with the government, pissed off with COVID and mandates. So they were able to recover from that, which for I'd say is probably for the better. Because
Mhm.
imagine if it was just ACT and National in the government, it would just be more of the same old. It'd be like John Key too. Like, it would just be terrible.
One of the things I also just want to chuck in there is I'm worried that from the globalists and communists learning from this election cycle, they actually saw that Tamaki and Gunn's party sort of managed to suck out some of the would-be voters that would have gone to NZ First, which would have actually been beneficial if they got a few more votes, as Diwa said. So I mean, one of the things I kind of worried about is, are they going to employ a tactic where they you know, um, put up these kind of faux parties, these ghost parties for next election, and in an attempt to again suck out that vote. And people may think, oh, you're like some weirdo. Why would you think that? But this kind of stuff goes on all the time throughout politics everywhere, all over the world. So it's not that. So and I mean that's certainly what happened last time. So and there are people who pay attention to this stuff, and I think it's pretty clear they really don't want Peters to gain any more, even milquetoast level nationalism. They don't want that to become prominent or gain any sort of significance in New Zealand politics. So I think that's something to acknowledge just quickly as well. That they are concentrating on these things, and whether that's intelligence or special interests, it's there. Did you want to comment on that, Diwa, or?
Yeah. I'll preface this by saying that I don't actually believe any of the people who were running last time were like controlled opposition, but it's certainly
Sure.
possible. It's certainly possible for that to happen. And it's, however, I'm not cynical enough to think that it's likely that they will put effort into that, because they will have a big enough hurdle just trying to take on National Act New Zealand First without putting resources into shenanigans. But also, there's like you have an interesting sort of, I don't know if it's a side effect of our MMP system, but there's always 1%, at least 1% of the vote that goes to what is the quote unquote crackpot crazy parties, like the super ultra fringe votes. And don't mean that in a demeaning way. I'm just describing the system. And it seems to be quite consistent across these elections. So there always seems to be somebody sitting out there on the fringes picking up a percentage point of the vote.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not fixable. And maybe that actually works in your favor. Like if you're New Zealand First, you'd be like, well, we're the normal people, not those crackpots over there who are getting the 1% of the vote, who are soaking that up, so that it can that it doesn't really harm them. Of course, it would be far more useful if they did have those votes, but at the same time, they'd be worried. Like the things you need to do to attract those voters becomes toxic to
Uh,
the existing voters that you have. So if you're seeing that vote grow massively on the edge, that's the protest vote basically on the edge, that's growing massively, maybe then there's some concern about, okay, who's influencing that, but otherwise it's not really a big problem. The thing that we had with the New Conservatives and the Conservative Party, I think the name may just go back to Conservatives, like it was at some
Oh, they're
point.
still around. I didn't realize the
So
New
it's
Conservatives
still
are
around.
still
Helen
around.
House is still around. I'm still in touch with her.
Oh, okay.
I'm not actively involved at the moment, but just around the edges. And but yeah, there's not much there in terms of uh, voters, because what happened is that when Winston Peters does well, then voters, the conservative voters just disappear. When Winston Peters voters are unhappy, when they feel like they've been betrayed, then the conservative vote grows. So it's basically like people who are unhappy with Winston Peters will vote for you, and then as soon as they're like, okay, maybe Winston Peters will give us what we want again, then they'll go back to Winston Peters. That's what I noticed with the vote
Yeah.
that we were getting. And so I'm kind of a bit like, yeah, okay, well, if our vote is directly tied to Winston Peters, then there's not much point in, um, unless you're there to punish him, which is good too. So maybe that's why the Conservatives will stick around, to kind of be there as like a threatening, like
Well, we have
if
to
you betray
start.
if you betray your voters again, then we'll hoover them up, kind of situation. I mean, that's not a bad thing either.
We have to start thinking about New Zealand first post Peters, because that day is probably going to come in the next decade. Either he's going to retire or his age will catch up to him, because
Yeah,
he's in
how
his
old is he actually now? You should
like
In his
80.
80s or
Yeah, he's like
something.
83. He's pretty old.
Yeah,
Oh no, he's 79, so not quite
79.
that old. Not as
yeah.
old as Joe Biden. I think I was thinking of Joe Biden's age, but he's like
Yeah, but
79.
even it's like Donald Trump is still going at, what is it?
76.
78 or oh,
Because
70.
he's
Yeah,
similar.
70.
Okay, that's interesting. So
Yeah, so
similar
he
age.
might be around for another election, but I think in 2 to 3 elections from now, we're going to have to start thinking of a post Peters New
Yep,
Zealand
and
first.
so New Zealand First is thinking about that, and they've got Shane Jones as their,
Yeah.
kind of the anointed one.
Hmm.
So it's a question really for New Zealand First voters, for nationalists, to be like, okay, is Shane Jones the anointed one? Is he, is that going to work, or is that not, or is that all going to fall apart? An interesting question. good. Like they do have a much better lineup now that people feel more comfortable with. Like Casey Costello, I know her. She was involved with the Conservatives.
Yeah,
in
I
the
like
background
Mark. He's an
years
MP I
ago.
like.
And Tanya Unkovich at the end there.
Oh,
and
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a few
yeah.
people on the list lower down than her who would potentially be good too. Like they're good fun.
Andy's good.
And I don't know about Andy. Don't know about him, but anyway.
I just said he's good.
Why don't you know about what?
I actually don't know about him. I said he's good because
He's from
like
Wellington.
he's a white male, so I assume he's probably all right.
Yeah. He got in like as kind of a lefty in Wellington.
Was he? Oh no.
Yeah, but anyway, I saw the because the lefties were upset. They felt they'd been betrayed because of some like trans stuff or whatever. And he was like the mayor. He got in by like promising them some like LGBT whatever. And
okay, that is actually sort of dodgy. Maybe he's not all right.
But then he's like going over to New Zealand first, and he's like just like stomping on them with with his boot. And so they're really mad. They're really mad at him.
What a troll!
So I don't know what's up with him.
Yeah, there's look at his face. Hector, zoom up on his face. He's like, "Oh, you thought we were gonna give you LGBT shit, mate? You think again? I'm gonna stomp you." I don't know if he sounds like that, but I imagine just with that smile, that's what he sounds like, and that's what he's saying to the leftists. Yeah,
calls himself a blue-green, whatever that means. So
yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. He's a bit of like a conservative environmentalist is the description. But usually these people are annoying. In the National Party, they're like the worst.
I mean, nothing wrong with conservation, but if they
go
on about like,
he fits in well. He has what you would call more like traditional working class economics, like old school leftist economics. Conservative environmentalism. But I don't know about like social.
But if he's going on about like climate change, it's like, oh, we need to do CO2 tax and stuff. It's like, oh, that's sort of a bit of a psyop there. Like,
literal communist psyop. Yeah, that's
so when was he mayor? He was 2019 to 2020.
Yeah.
So he was just there before Tory Fano. He may have lost the election to Tory Fano actually, so maybe he's not that bad.
Were we planning to talk about her? She's a bit in the news lately because she's spending all her money on crack or something.
yeah.
The mayor of Wellington.
What's the latest gig with her? Yeah, she's like doing crack, or she's like riding a motorcycle off the Harbour Bridge or something. Like, what's the latest with her?
I don't know anything. I try to avoid knowing about Wellington, but we can talk about her very briefly. I wasn't even thinking about talking about her, but it's funny.
I wasn't either, but yeah, it just sort of came up.
She won Lotto. I don't know if you know this.
But
Lotto, in the early 2000s, I believe, and she got like $1.2 million from Lotto. And she's the mayor, so she gets paid like $200K per year. But she owns. I checked the suburb where she owns her house because I looked at her pecuniary interest register to see if she has any assets because she's saying like she can't pay her mortgage. I'm like, what kind of mortgage does she have with that kind of money? But the place that she lives is not that expensive. Like the median house in the area she lives in is only like 700, 800K. If you're on a 200K mortgage, that's not a problem. And if you had $1.2 million in Lotto, so clearly she spent it all on something.
Spent it all on chicken wings,
the theory is like booze and cocaine, I guess, because she basically has no money and she has a massive mortgage, and she says she can't afford her lifestyle when she's earning $200K.
Yeah, well, so this seems like a good person to be running the city. Someone that like blew $1 million on like buying chicken wings and cocaine. Like that seems like a great person to run your city.
To me, it's perfect for Wellington. It sounds just like what they deserve.
Yeah, it is sort of true.
That's great.
Yeah, okay.
It does.
Well, that was our Wellington segment that we weren't really planning to do. Maybe just going back to New Zealand first and right-wing politics. Like in other countries, such as the Austrians, they're having an election in like half a week, like 3 days from now. And at the moment, the Austrian Freedom Party, which is a sort of right-wing, it's sort of like the Austrian version of like AfD, the Epic German Party. So it's sort of like that. They have,
translates from German to Epic German Party.
Yeah, that's pretty close actually. But Freedom Party of Austria, they have policies around reducing migration, against Islamicization of European cities. I think they even have like a deportation policy. So you have like this literal, New Zealand First equivalent party that looks like they're going to win. They potentially are going to have the prime ministership in Austria, unless there's like a grand coalition formed against him, which is maybe possible. But they're going to win. Like they're going to get a plurality of the votes. Like, and it looks like
they've been in coalition before with the
the
Liberal
Conservative
Party.
But this time they'll be
Party.
yeah. And this time they'll be in the leading position, so they'll be able to lead that coalition with the Conservatives supporting them. You'd think, unless some
it's
shenanigans happen.
possible. It's possible, and it's interesting that they were sort of they used to be like the libertarian kind of party, right? So that's also an option if you talk about New Zealand politics. There's also a potential for like ACT to somehow become like the base party if you get like some hard right libertarian takeover. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, there's too many Koreans and Chinamen in that party for it to ever be epic.
And yeah, they're exactly like I said this already earlier. They're very much focused on their like multi-ethnic democracy stuff, which I guess the Austrian Freedom Party never was.
Yeah, of course, it makes it a lot better.
And yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Obviously, one of the first interviews I did on RCR was Martin Sellner, which got some journalists so upset they went like and cried to Christopher Luxon about it, and he told them to go away.
Yeah, it's sort of good that he's saying that. It's like if it was just Cinder, she'd be like, "Oh, this is not horrible. We're a team of 60 million. No."
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is all good news for them, like AFD winning elections. But see, what's happening in Europe, because if we think about how we translate that into New Zealand, it becomes more difficult because they have massive amounts of illegal immigration. Like they're previously very homogenous society, massive amounts of illegal immigration from Africa, mostly from the Middle East as well, and highly Islamic as well. New Zealand is a very different country where we have all of our immigration is 100% legal. We have a massive moat around the island, and people get imported for like economic reasons, right? So they're not people fleeing or just trying to get welfare. They actually got to have like some kind of economic.
Yeah, but the argument there is that like there's obviously no economic benefits now. Like there's no one's benefiting from mass migration because we talked about this off air. We've been in like a per capita recession for the last 2.5 years. Or 2 years.
Absolutely. So then it's of course, hopefully the conversation can shift in New Zealand. But if people want to understand why it hasn't, why it's so difficult, why we kind of need to approach this from a different angle, is just because of the different situation that we're in, and that's why they've been so successful. But obviously, the Labour Party dropped the standards so far that we have hundreds of thousands of like no skill, like they call them low skill,
no skill migrants.
No skill is the best better way. And so we have hundreds of thousands of these no-skill immigrants, and mostly from India, some from the Philippines
and China.
And that's creating bigger problems here in Auckland as well. Like it just doesn't really filter up into the media, but you get attacks against like people on buses and bus drivers even. And I think they're going to start filtering them out of the media. But you had a case where there was a video recently of like it was a Maori woman who got on the bus and she was like counting like 1, 2, 3, 4. Counting like the elderly Chinese pensioners who were sitting on the bus, like 1, 2, and then she got like a metal rod out and like smashed in the teeth of this Chinese boy.
Oh man, that's terrible.
And then you had another one just the other week with like an Indian bus driver who got like punched in the face and told like, oh, you serve us or you're our slave or something, whatever. Like, again, it was a Maori guy. So there's like like really bad ethnic tensions between the Maori and Polynesian people and those immigrants. And a large part of that is because like we talked about public transport earlier.
Maoris don't know how to drive.
Used to be filled with their people, right? So they would get on the public transport and they wouldn't notice the great replacement happening because they just like get on their buses. But now you're a Polynesian, you get on your bus and suddenly it's 100% Chinese people on the bus or whatever.
Chinese and Filipinos and Indians and stuff. Yeah.
And then they start to think like, oh, what happened to my country? And they're not, they tend to be lower class people, and you get like ethnic tensions then. So because I remember when I was studying, at least like if I was on the bus, I'm the one European guy on the bus, but it's all these Maori people, Polynesian people, whatever. They're all very kind and very nice to you, but then suddenly, of course, when that equation is completely flipped against them, they're trying to figure out like what happened to my country. And that's causing big problems. And of course, you have very high preferences as well, particularly within Indian immigrants, that they want to live with other Indians, and so they build these enclaves. And big parts of the city are like basically just Indian groups of people. And I just like recently heard complaints of won't be too specific, but say people who had moved in, they were renting from these Indian people and getting scammed. And I'm like, I've heard that story.
Indians are scamming each other all the
100 times, man. And even India, like, I know lots of nice Indian people who will complain about this all the time. Like the we used to have Indian immigrants who would then come here to get away from that, but obviously, like because of Jacinda Ardern's changes to the immigration policy, all those other Indians followed them here as well, and so so it's going to be it's going to become a big problem one way or another.
Yeah.
And it's going to get worse here in New Zealand.
Uh,
And the left wing think like the left wingers, you know, if they're listening or reading a transcript of this or whatever, they think, oh
probably.
yeah, this is great. Like we're going to replace white people and have left wing dominance forever. It's like, no, that's not how it's working in Auckland. You can see that it's not like just their target being like, oh yes, we'll just have this big anti-white replacement
Anti-white alliance, yeah.
and they'll all come together and be against the white people. Like, no, that's not how it happens. And especially if you look demographically,
Once we get this working,
you know, their quest for you know, the sort of nationalism, maybe their own nation, maybe a piece of the action. Because, you know, we're talking about treaty principles as well and why that's become such a big deal. The thing is, these immigrants, they don't want that. So you're looking at how they vote. They're going to vote for like Labour. Sorry, they're not going to vote for Labour. They're going to vote for National and ACT because they want to be treated equally. They don't want special privileges for some other group of people, right? They're like, I didn't come here from China to be treated as a second-class citizen. I didn't come here from India to become a second-class citizen. And so they vote for these quote-unquote right-wing parties because of that. So a very different situation than in Europe, say, where these immigrants are just brought in as like voting bloc for the Labour Party. That's not, that used to be the case in New Zealand when they, I guess, focus on Polynesian immigration. But that's just not the case anymore. And so we have a very different political situation that people should be aware of.
Yeah. So do you think that's part of the reason why the last election it seemed that immigration, despite being like the issue affecting things like standard of living and the cost of living crisis, was basically not mentioned at all? Like last election cycle, 2022, there was just 2023. Sorry, like no one, not like New Zealand First didn't talk about it. Obviously, ACT and National weren't talking about immigration. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, so we actually, because I was involved in the New Conservative campaign, I can tell you, because we had a net zero policy that we had talked about in the previous election, and we didn't even end up campaigning on it because like nobody was talking about immigration, and a big part of it was that the borders were actually closed in terms of
Yes.
if you look at these specific immigration numbers at that time, it's zero for like a year, like during the election year. So you couldn't talk about immigration as an election issue because it literally was just zero. And that's basically what happened. It was just the way that the election fell and what was happening at the time. I expect it'll be a much bigger issue in the future.
Oh yeah, and we're going to
help
push
it.
it.
In large because the economic issues are going to come to the forefront, and then people are going to be asking questions like, okay, how come our GDP per capita has shrunk by 3.5%? You know, how come disposable income that people have is declined? And Matthew Hooton wrote for this in the New Zealand Herald that was down by 6.2% in the last 2 years. So that means that the average four-person household has got $1,600 less per month.
It's insane.
Like inflation adjusted than 2 years ago. I mean, that's massive. And so, yeah. And
but we need to import more people to like fix our toilets. Apparently, we don't know how to, or to like make butter chicken. We don't have the recipes.
Yeah, no, we need them to pump petrol at the petrol station. And
they'll run liquor stores or something. It's like
deep fried chicken. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, obviously, you don't need all these people coming in to do literally the work you could like automate to a robot most of the time.
And it's a vicious cycle in New Zealand, because if you look at mass migration in the last year, you had 67,000 people net gain. But then if you look at the inflows and the outflows, it's like a revolving door where you've got 200,000 people coming in. 200,000 people, that's about 4% of the population, I think, just freshly arrived in the last 12 months, and 133 people going out. And less than half of those people going out were immigrants moving out. There's New Zealand, over half of those are New Zealand citizens bailing on the country. So you're taking New Zealand citizens that are going out of the country, and you're just like replacing them with, and these are higher skill immigrants, higher skill New Zealanders, sorry, not immigrants, higher skill locals and New Zealand citizens who are going overseas for a better economic situation. And then you've got these 200,000 lower skill immigrants that you're replacing them with, and then you're churning through them. So in the healthcare system, you've got a massive number of immigrants that are being employed, and many of them are just temporary workers. And so, and they replace, like, oh yeah, they need lots of, we need immigrants to run the healthcare system. They only need to stick around for 2 years on average, and then they go off again somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a sad. It's definitely not a sign of a healthy society, is it? Where you're losing 50,000 people a year, and then importing 150,000 Filipinos and Indians and Chinamen to replace them. It's obviously something's fundamentally broken here that no one wants to talk about, and that what is fundamentally broken is the cost of living crisis caused by mass migration itself. Like, it's a very easy issue to fix. Actually, it's actually surprisingly simple to
But they
sort
don't
this
want to
out.
do it.
Yeah, they just don't want to do it
Mm.
because there's a lot. I mean, there's not even a lot of people. There's some people, maybe like 2%, 5% of the people benefit from mass migration, while the 95% of everyone else suffers because of our increased cost of living, our increased cost of interest rates and hike rates and rent hikes and all sorts of things. But there's a couple of people, like a couple landlords, a couple property developers, maybe a couple big businesses that benefit, while everyone else just suffers. We just left to continue to see our paychecks getting eaten and eaten away by inflation, while I don't know, some companies get to hire Sanjeet Pajit to run their petrol pumps at the BP. It's like it's not a very good system, is it?
And the price of houses continues to climb to the point where, say, if you want to start a family in New Zealand, you're completely priced out.
Yeah,
If
and
you
then
want
they're
to
like, oh, our
work
birth
hard,
rates are down. Oh, people can't afford to
and
buy a
yeah,
house. Why are our birth rates down? It doesn't make any sense. Oh, we need to import more Pajeets because our birth rates are down because no one can afford to own a house. It's like, maybe just fix it. Maybe we could just have our cost of living go. Our standard of living go up, and people will start having kids again.
yeah, and massive investment basically it goes into like building houses in New Zealand, right? The old joke of like New Zealand being a housing market with an economy attached to it, and
Yeah,
and a
that
lot
needs
of
to
that is just
change.
built on like gaining, house prices gaining. Like ideally, the reforms are done in such a way that the house prices become permanently stable, like much lower and then permanently stable, which can only be done if you have a stable population. And so you basically effectively need a net zero immigration policy permanently in place to ensure that housing prices don't blow out of control.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, it's just a question of great, build more houses to get more people, and then why do people leave? Because the house price is high, because um, tougher to find jobs, go somewhere overseas where it's easier. And at the end of the like we're at the end of the world, and we can't build a high population, because the economies of scale that you get from having millions and millions of people highly concentrated in one place, they're up there in East Asia, and even in Sydney and in the middle of Europe, in the coasts, American coasts, like on both their east and west coast. Though they have the economies of scale with very high concentrated population, sometimes tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people living very, very closely together. New Zealand basically just needs to forget that and realize that even if we had a shrinking population, we'd probably be able to increase our GDP per capita.
oh,
Like if,
absolutely.
without any trouble at all. We don't need to build our economy on just like importing people. Like, 'cause the economy is basically built on importing people. It doesn't matter where they come from. Doesn't matter how skilled they are. Doesn't matter what their wealth is. They just like every person becomes an economic unit in the economic zone that gets farmed by
Yeah,
the government.
yeah.
It's like we're not farming sheep or
Yeah,
beef. Like we're just farming people.
people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is pretty much. It's pretty much like the way that there's a no border society. Everyone's just interchangeable units of labor, like under communism. So, I mean, that's what globalism leads to. It's sort of
Right.
interesting that how I've talked to Gimpsy about it. How you have these conservatives and things that go, oh, we're all the same. We're all just pieces. We're all just the need to pay our taxes, and we can all everyone can learn our culture. Like, buddy, you sound like a communist. You're just saying everyone's the same, and like the only thing that matters is economic output. It's sort of ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways,
Insane. It's totally
yeah.
insane.
I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, if our system can't survive without population growth, I mean, you need to fix the system. You don't just need to import more people to continue population growth. There's something fundamentally wrong here. The population will grow once society is healthy. We see that. It's the way human history has worked for the last 10,000 years.
Methinks that they have ulterior motives that they're not willing to be fully transparent about, because it does get to a point where it's so ridiculous that it's like, so what are you really here for? What are you people actually doing here? and I think people are kind of catching on that, yeah, that there's another agenda, and yeah, oh boy. Yeah, hopefully enough pressure can be applied to get them to skyrocket it back to a more conservative immigration policy in New Zealand. I guess what do you think, Diwa? Do you think after everything that's happened, it seems like these past 12 to 24 months there have been major strides since Jacinda Ardern pressed the eject seat to the UN and never came back, or at least as far as we know. How do you, I guess, just in general, feel about New Zealand, where we're going after everything that's happened? What are the trends you're picking up on? Would you like to say something on that, or?
I'll first say I've got about 5 minutes or so left before I've got
Okay.
to get off and
Yeah,
finish some other stuff.
sure.
So we'll have to wrap this up soon, and it's okay, probably good topic to finish up on in terms of trends. I'm over. Like, I tend to be more optimistic, maybe too optimistic. I think the trend is in a healthier direction now,
I do
where
think so as well. Yeah.
we have a and the key part is like we had a quite a I say unique, maybe I hope a new way of building government coalitions in New Zealand as well, where they have a very transparent agreement that you've got these three different parties and they've agreed on achieving a bunch of things during this political term. And I've got a coalition tracker that I've built. It's a little bit out of date at the moment because I'm so busy, but I will, by the end of the year, like on there, I'll make sure it's fully up to date. And it'll be good to go into the next election with that to say, here's what they negotiated, here's what they delivered, and they delivered on whatever percentage. And that gives voters and especially activists who have a lot of influence within parties to push for those things, coalition parties to negotiate on more of those points. And then you say, sweet, I'm going to go and support this particular party because they're going to try and negotiate this point. And if it ends up in a coalition agreement, well, then you can be pretty confident that it's going to happen and that they're going to go and work their way through and deliver it.
Yeah.
And that's just a much, much healthier way of doing politics, in my opinion. And of course, it makes the leftists are like insanely outraged by this, which is always good.
It's insanely outraged by participating in the democratic system. It's sort of funny.
Yeah, they will of course always be outraged by everything that's happening, but they keep complaining about the outsized power. Like they're like, oh, how come Mister 7% of the vote can get like all of this stuff? It's like, yeah, well, that's part of the
Deal with
system,
it. That's what I say. Cry
and
about
deal
it,
with
man.
it. Yep. And so we need to take advantage of that and make sure that the coalition agreement is much more radical next
Yeah.
time in our
Oh,
favor. And by radical, I mean normal, like more normal policies. And,
yeah, of course.
and we need a lot more normal policies in the next coalition agreement, and so that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think we
Radically
should all
normal.
do our
Love it.
part on social media as, political commentators, as social media personalities. We need to hold these politicians to the fire. We need to make sure that mass immigration and the negative downsides economically that have caused the economic consequences of mass immigration are at the forefront of the next national election and the local election. Like, we need to make that one of our main goals in the next 2 years, is getting immigration to the forefront of people's minds, and the massive harm that it's doing to our society and our economy. So I think that's what we have to do. But yeah, we'll start wrapping up then. You said you don't have much longer. I just have one chat to read. It's from SMP24. It says, De Boer, sounds like you're South African. Is that true? Has he doxed you?
No, he's wrong.
You're wrong.
He's wrong. Never been there. Don't have any ancestors that set foot there. And De Boer is actually a very uncommon last name from South Africa, so it's Dutch. Usually the people who are more cultured, they guess Dutch correctly because they're sort of pick up on that a little bit more. But it's fun because it's common. It's a very common question I get, and my favorite part about this, people thinking I'm South African, is that if it's on Twitter, I'll get like these raging leftists who will be like, "Oh, it's another sapphire, go back to."
Right
Wow.
about it,
So
nerd.
And so
tolerant. So
we hate
tolerant.
another racist immigrant, another big. I hate, kind of like
Right
they
about
start doing
it.
this, like I hate immigrants thing. I love it
Yeah.
when they do that. You get these like deranged leftists suddenly like I hate immigrants. So I kind of lean into that a little bit too
Yeah,
sometimes.
I would as well. Making
And
commies seed
and
is
it's
always pretty
why, like, I
funny.
mean, yes, I am an immigrant. It's not like my ancestors built this land. I've only been here for 20 years, but I'm super interested and invested in New Zealand because like my wife's family goes back to the beginning in the 1840s and 50s, and obviously I want this place to have, like, I want my kids to have a future here, and that's really important. I think for a lot of people and a lot of younger people that are thinking about politics and are thinking about life in the sense of like, what am I doing to secure a future for my children, and is this country going to have a future for them? And this is a very different approach to like the boomers who are like, how do I get my own future? How can I make money, and then my kids can throw them to the wolves and they can bootstrap themselves and so on. Seeing a big shift in younger people who are still building families. Unfortunately, it is more difficult, sure, but we have to do it.
Oh,
And to
absolutely, yeah.
think about like, what does the future look like for my children, and what can we do to have a functioning, healthy society where they'll be better off? And instead of just bailing on it, I mean, obviously that's a lot of people, and this is sadly what's happening. People are just like, oh well, it's stuffed, I'm going to bail.
Yeah.
And I'm very much with the mindset of like, no, we don't need to bail. We can turn this around.
Well,
And
where were you going to run to? I mean, everywhere, every Western country is facing the same problems, like mass immigration, cultural genocide. Every single Western country is facing it, and a lot of non-Western countries are starting to face it as well.
yeah, you can't run from like the global problem. It's like saying in the last century you were going to run away for, or 2 centuries ago now, I guess, you wanted to run away from the British Empire. It didn't matter where you went; they'd go and find you. And it's kind of like that with the replacement of the British Empire, which is like basically global communism.
Yeah, of course.
And full homogenization. Well, it's in some sense it's an effect of Americanization, like the globalization of everything, interchangeable. That's made everybody interchangeable, labor units, and everything can
It's
be
literally
produced in
just
any
communism,
country.
right? Yeah.
And yeah, so it's not
Fuck.
just like it's not. It's also a side effect of capitalism in a sense to get this kind of an outcome. Um, but I see many good things on the horizon. I see a lot of people thinking about this,
Yeah, it depends on
and
how.
a lot more people complaining.
Yeah,
More
sorry.
people, just more people complaining about the fact that um, their cities look unrecognizable, and they
Yeah,
feel like uh, just to get normal, non-political people saying that to me, people I've known for a long time, or people on the street, or new people, or people who've just moved here, even had like fresh immigrants, be like, oh, hey, there's some stuff, and they kind of approach it from a bit of a cagey direction, and you tell them it's okay to talk about it, and suddenly like, blah, they blurt it all out.
yeah. It's like it's okay. You're in good. You're in good company.
and and that gives me hope as well, because then that people are thinking about this and they're
Yeah,
even willing to talk about it, as long once they
yeah,
realize that it's safe to talk about it.
yeah. Cool, cool. All right. Assume you probably have to bail now, but thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's been interesting discussions, and yeah, good luck with what you guys are doing. And like, I used to do some live streaming with Tim Wilms from Australia.
Oh yeah, I like Tim's show. Maybe we can get him on the
And
show
it's
someday.
great to have people doing some live streaming.
Yeah,
But New Zealand's a bit of a small country, so it can be hard, but
yeah.
good to see you guys giving it a go.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for the positive feedback. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and I'll sign off for the show. Any final words, Gil?
Not much. Yeah, come back on soon anytime. Diwa, it's been fun. Make sure that you all follow us on X, follow us on YouTube, and Rumble, and we'll have other links coming out soon. Make sure to get prepared for the U.S. election stream coming up. We'll be streaming on that too, and make sure to follow Dieuwe de Boer on RCR and the Zeitgeist and all of his links and to keep up to date with all of us. And that's me over and out.
Cool, man. All right. Thanks to everyone for watching this live, and thanks to everyone watching the replay. Hope you have a great weekend, and as you always do, I hope you stay blessed and not stressed. We'll see you guys next week, and have a lovely weekend.